When my husband died, his millionaire boss called me. "Ma'am, I found something. Come to my office right now. Don't tell your son or daughter-in-law anything. You could be in danger." When I arrived, I froze upon seeing who was at the door. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment from what city you are viewing me from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I never thought that after 45 years of marriage, I would feel like a stranger in my own life. But there I was, seated in the front pew at Elijah's funeral, while my son, Marcus, and my daughter-in-law, Kira, handled every decision as if I didn't exist. "Mama, just leave this to us. You just worry about staying calm," Marcus had told me that morning, with that condescending voice he had developed over the last few years. Kira nodded beside him with that false smile I'd grown all too familiar with. I stayed quiet because I didn't have the strength to fight. Elijah had died of a heart attack 3 days earlier, so suddenly that I still couldn't fully process it. One moment he was eating breakfast with me, talking about the garden he wanted to plant in the spring, and the next, I found him collapsed in the garage. I watched the people filling the community church, Elijah's co-workers, neighbors, some distant relatives. Everyone approached Marcus and Kira to offer condolences, as if they were the ones who were widowed. I was just an old woman of 68 who needed to be shielded from the trauma. "Grandma is very fragile," I heard Kira whisper to someone. "Marcus and I are taking care of everything." Fragile. That word hurt more than any empty condolence. Elijah never saw me as fragile. To him, I was Lena, his partner, his equal. But ever since Marcus married Kira 5 years ago, everything had gradually changed. During the service, I noticed something strange. Marcus seemed more relieved than grief-stricken. Every time someone approached to console him, he responded with a composure that bordered on indifference. Kira, for her part, had tears in her eyes, but something about her expression felt calculated, as if she were putting on a performance. After the burial, at the home Elijah and I had shared for so many years, people gathered for the lunch Kira had organized. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching my daughter-in-law run everything as if it were her own house. "Lena, you should go rest," Kira suggested, approaching me with a cup of tea I hadn't asked for. "It's been a very long day for you." "I'm fine right here," I replied, but my voice sounded weaker than I intended. Marcus came over and sat on the sofa across from me. "Mama, Kira and I have been talking. We don't think you should stay in this house alone. It's too big for you, and after what happened with Dad." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Well," Marcus continued, exchanging a look with Kira, "there are some very nice retirement communities where you'd be safer, with people your own age, activities." "I am not going to any nursing home," I said, feeling indignation give me strength I didn't know I had. Kira sat beside me, taking my hand with a softness I found unbearable. "It's not a nursing home, Lena. They are elegant senior living facilities, and we could visit you every weekend. This is my home," I mumbled, but I already felt my resolve crumbling under their pitying gazes. The conversation was interrupted by the phone ringing. Marcus got up to answer it, and I could hear his voice from the kitchen, though not the exact words. When he returned, his expression had changed. "It was someone from Dad's office," he said, looking annoyed. "They wanted to talk to you about some paperwork." "What paperwork?" I asked. "I don't know. I told him you were indisposed, that they could arrange anything with me." Something in his tone bothered me. "Marcus, your father worked at that company for 30 years. If they want to talk to me about something, I have the right to hear it." "Mama, don't worry about those things. We'll handle all the paperwork and legal affairs." That night, after everyone left and Marcus and Kira finally left me alone, I sat on the bed I had shared with Elijah for so many years. The house was too silent, full of memories that now felt distant. That's when my cell phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Mrs. Lena Odom," a man's voice said on the other end of the line. "I'm Theodore Vance, your husband's boss at Sterling and Grant Financial." "Mr. Vance," I replied, recalling the name. Elijah had mentioned his boss several times, always with respect. "Ma'am, I am so sorry for your loss. Elijah was an extraordinary man, and everyone at the office valued him immensely. Thank you, I murmured. There was a pause, and then his voice became more serious. Mrs. Odom, I need to see you urgently. There's something you need to know about the last few months of your husband's life. Something important. My heart started beating faster. What kind of thing? I can't talk over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? And ma'am, it is crucial that you don't tell your son or daughter-in-law anything about this conversation. Elijah was very specific about that. The air caught in my lungs. Why? What is going on? Please, Mrs. Odom, come tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Your husband asked me that if anything happened to him, I should make sure to speak with you. But only with you. The line cut off, and I was left sitting in the dark, holding the phone with trembling hands. Elijah had anticipated his death. He had left specific instructions, and for some reason, those instructions included keeping Marcus and Kira out of the loop. For the first time since his death, I felt like my husband was talking to me from somewhere far away, telling me to pay attention, that this was not the time to be fragile. Something was terribly wrong, and I was the only one who could figure it out. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since Elijah's death, I had a clear purpose. I dressed carefully, choosing the navy blue suit Elijah always said made me look elegant and strong. Marcus called early, as he had been doing since the funeral. How did you sleep, Mama? Kira and I were thinking maybe you should stay with us for a few days. I'm fine, son, I replied, trying to sound normal. In fact, I have to go out this morning. There was a pause. Go out where? My mind worked quickly. To the pharmacy. I ran out of my blood pressure pills. I can bring you the pills. You don't have to go out, Marcus. I can drive to the drugstore. I am not an invalid. His sigh was audible through the phone. All right, but be careful, and if you need anything, call us immediately. I drove downtown with my hands clenched on the steering wheel. The Sterling and Grant Financial Building was a 20-story glass tower that had always intimidated me a little. Elijah worked on the 15th floor in the Internal Audit Department. The receptionist guided me to the executive floor, where I had never been. Theodore Vance's office was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, mahogany furniture, and a sense of power that permeated the air. Theodore Vance was a man of about 55, with perfectly styled gray hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He stood up when I entered, and I saw genuine concern in his eyes. Mrs. Odom, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. I settled into one of the leather chairs in front of his desk, feeling as if I was in uncharted territory. First of all, Theo began, I want you to know that your husband was one of our most valuable employees. In 30 years, we never had a single complaint about his work. Thank you, I murmured, although something in his tone told me this was just the preamble. Theo stood up and walked to a file cabinet behind his desk. He took out a thick folder and placed it in front of me. Mrs. Odom, during the last 6 months of his life, Elijah came to see me several times with very specific concerns. He opened the folder, revealing pages and pages of documents, handwritten notes in Elijah's familiar script, and what looked like photographs of other documents. Concerns about what? Theo looked me straight in the eyes. About his family. I felt like the floor had moved beneath my feet. My family? Elijah believed that his son and daughter-in-law were trying to manipulate him into making significant changes to his will and his bank accounts. The words didn't make immediate sense. That is impossible. Marcus would never— Mrs. Odom, he interrupted gently, did you know that in the last 8 months, Elijah received multiple visits from your son and daughter-in-law, often when you were not home? They repeatedly suggested to him that it would be better for you if he organized things so that if something happened to him, Marcus would have immediate legal power over all financial and medical decisions related to you. I shook my head, but something cold settled in my stomach. That can't be true, I whispered. Theo opened one of the pages and turned it toward me. It was a photocopy of a partially completed legal document. I recognized Elijah's signature at the bottom, but it was crossed out. Elijah brought this to me 3 months ago. He said Marcus had pressured him to sign it, telling him it was best for the family and that it would protect you from having to make difficult decisions if he were gone. I read the first lines of the document. It was a transfer of power of attorney that would have given Marcus total control over all our finances and medical decisions related to me if Elijah died or became incapacitated. But he didn't sign it, I observed. No, and that's what started to worry Elijah. As he told me, when he refused to sign it, Marcus became very upset. He told him he was being selfish, that he wasn't thinking about what would be best for you. My mind began to make connections I didn't want to make. I remembered Marcus and Kira's visits over the last year, how they always seemed to be whispering about something when I entered the room. "There's more," Theo continued, turning to another page. "Elijah also told me that Kira had begun suggesting you were showing signs of confusion, of memory loss." "What?" "Apparently, she had started commenting to both Elijah and Marcus that you were repeating stories, forgetting conversations, that perhaps you needed closer medical supervision." I felt like I had been punched. I'm not. My memory is perfectly fine. Elijah knew that. That's why he started documenting everything, every conversation, every suggestion, every pressure he felt from them. Theo flipped through several more pages, showing me detailed notes in Elijah's hand, dates, times, transcribed conversations. My husband had been keeping a meticulous record of what now appeared to be a sustained campaign to undermine my confidence and gain control over our lives. "Why didn't he tell me anything?" I asked, feeling tears that I didn't know I had. "He told me he didn't want to worry you until he was sure what was happening. He hoped he was wrong." Just then, a loud knock sounded on the office door. Theo and I turned, and my heart stopped when I saw who entered. Marcus and Kira were standing in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of surprise and something darker. "Mama," Marcus said, and his voice had a tone I had never heard before. "What are you doing here?" Kira stepped forward with that condescending smile I now recognized as a mask. "Lena, we were so worried when we couldn't find you at home. Why didn't you tell us you were coming here?" Theo stood up slowly, and I could see tension in every line of his body. "Mr. Odom, Mrs. Odom, this is a private conversation between your mother and me. I would appreciate it if you would respect that." Kira let out a forced laugh. "With all due respect, Mr. Vance, Lena has been very fragile since Elijah's death. We don't think it's appropriate for her to make important decisions without family supervision." "Family supervision?" I repeated, feeling the indignation rise in my chest. "I'm 68 years old. I'm not a child." Marcus exchanged a glance with Kira that did not go unnoticed by me. It was the same look they had shared at the funeral, heavy with a meaning I didn't understand. "Of course you're not a child, Mama," Marcus said, but his tone was the same one he would use with a difficult child. "It's just that we want to protect you from people who might take advantage of your grief." I looked at Theo, who had remained silent, watching the exchange with a serious expression. Then I looked at the closed folder on the desk, knowing it contained information that would change everything. "Theo," I said, using his name deliberately, "could you give me a few minutes to talk to my son and daughter-in-law?" He nodded. "Of course. I'll be right outside." Once he left, the air in the room changed completely. Marcus visibly relaxed, as if he had won something important. "Mama, I don't know what that man has been telling you, but you have to understand that people can be very manipulative when money is involved." "Money?" I asked. Kira sat down in the chair next to me. "Lena, honey, we know Elijah had a considerable life insurance policy, and with the house and his savings, there are unscrupulous people who take advantage of widows." Something cold settled in my stomach. "How do you two know about Elijah's life insurance?" Marcus and Kira exchanged another one of those charged glances. "Well," Marcus said, looking uncomfortable for the first time, "Dad mentioned it a few months ago when we were talking about—" about making sure you were taken care of if something happened to him. Funny, I said slowly, because Elijah never mentioned those conversations to me. The silence stretched between us. That's when I heard a sound that brought my world to a complete halt. A cough I would recognize anywhere in the world. The three of us turned toward the door of the private bathroom connected to Theo's office. The door slowly opened, and a figure emerged that made my heart stop and then start pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. Elijah, my husband, the man I had buried 4 days ago, was standing there, alive, breathing, looking at me with a mixture of love and apology in his eyes. "Hello, Lena," he said softly. I think I screamed. I'm not sure. What I do remember is that the world started spinning around me, and if Elijah hadn't rushed toward me, I would have fallen out of the chair. "What? How?" I mumbled, touching his face with trembling hands to make sure it was real. Behind us, I heard Kira let out a gasp, and Marcus murmur a word I prefer not to repeat. Elijah held me carefully, his familiar hands steadying me as they had for 45 years. "I'm sorry, my love. I'm so sorry to have put you through this. But it was the only way." "The only way to what?" I asked, though a part of me was already beginning to understand. Elijah looked up at Marcus and Kira, and his expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "The only way to protect you from them." Marcus found his voice first. "This is impossible. You're dead. We saw you. There was a funeral. There's a death certificate." Elijah straightened up, but kept a protective arm around me. There was a falsified death certificate, with the help of a very discreet doctor and a funeral director who owed a few favors. Theo helped me set up everything. "But why?" I whispered. Elijah looked at me tenderly before addressing Marcus and Kira again. "Because I found out what you were planning." Kira turned pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Elijah said, walking toward the desk and opening the folder Theo had closed. "Then you don't recognize this?" He pulled out a series of documents and placed them on the desk. Even from where I was sitting, I could see they were copies of emails, text messages, and what appeared to be transcribed recordings. "Mama is starting to show signs of dementia. I think you should consider the possibility of her needing full-time care soon. If Dad signs the documents I prepared for him, we can make sure she has the best possible care when the time comes." Elijah read aloud from the document. My son had gone completely white. Elijah continued reading. Kira agreed, and the sooner the better. The house alone is worth almost $500,000, and that's not counting his retirement savings. I sat down heavily, feeling like I had received a physical blow. They had been planning to declare me incompetent. They had been calculating the value of our house, of our savings. "This is taken out of context," Marcus said desperately. "We were worried about Mama. We just wanted to make sure." "Make sure of what?" Elijah interrupted. "That you could control her life, that you could declare her incompetent and put her in an institution while you sold the house and spent our savings?" Kira stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous, Elijah. Faking your own death is a crime. There are fake certificates, fraudulent documents." "You're right," Elijah said calmly. "I am willing to face the consequences, but first, I wanted Lena to know the truth about what you two have been planning." He walked up to me and took my hands. "My love, for the last 8 months, they have been visiting me regularly when you are not here. At first, I thought it was because they worried about us, but I gradually realized that every conversation was designed to convince me that you were losing mental capacity, that you needed supervision, that it would be selfish of me not to make legal arrangements to protect you." I looked at Marcus, my son, the baby I had carried in my arms, whom I had comforted during nightmares, whom I had loved unconditionally for 35 years. "Is that true?" I asked him. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes that might have been shame, but then it hardened. "Mama, you don't understand the financial pressures we face. Kira and I have debts. Obligations. So it was true, I murmured. Elijah squeezed my hands. When I realized what was happening, I hired a private investigator. We discovered that Marcus has gambling debts of over $150,000, and Kira has been using credit cards in your name without your knowledge. The world wobbled around me once more. Credit cards in my name? 3 different cards, Elijah said softly, with a total debt of over $10,000. Kira finally exploded. This is enough, Elijah. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but this ends now. Lena, let's go. Clearly your husband has lost his mind. But I didn't move. For the first time in months, maybe years, everything made sense. The constant visits, the exaggerated concern for my well-being, the suggestions about my memory, the rush to make me make decisions about my future immediately after the funeral. They hadn't been taking care of me. They had been preparing me to be sacrificed. I am not going anywhere, I finally said. My voice was stronger than it had sounded in a long time. But I think you two should leave. The expression on Marcus's face changed to something I had never seen before. He was no longer my worried son. He was a stranger who had just lost something he had been counting as his. Elijah helped me sit on the office sofa while Theo returned with a bottle of water and a grave expression. Marcus and Kira remained standing near the door, like cornered animals deciding whether to flee or attack. "Lena," Elijah said softly, kneeling in front of me, "there's more you need to know." My mind was still struggling to process that my husband was alive, that he had faked his death, that my son and daughter-in-law had been planning to steal everything from me for months. But something in Elijah's expression told me the worst was yet to come. "More?" I murmured. Theo opened another section of the folder and pulled out what looked like a series of photographs. He placed them on the coffee table in front of us. "These photos were taken by the private investigator over the last 6 weeks," Elijah explained. I picked up the photographs with trembling hands. The first showed Marcus entering what looked like a casino. The second showed him at a poker table, betting chips representing amounts of money I couldn't imagine. The third showed Kira in an expensive jewelry store trying on a necklace that cost more than our mortgage payment. "Marcus," Elijah said, his voice cold as ice. "Do you want to explain to your mother how you could bet $25,000 in a single night when you told me you needed help paying the mortgage?" My son didn't answer, but I could see his jaws clench. Elijah continued. "Or maybe Kira can explain how she could buy a $4,000 necklace last week when you are supposedly struggling to make ends meet." Kira finally spoke, her voice now stripped of all the false sweetness she had been using with me. "Elijah, you don't know what you're talking about. That necklace was an imitation." "An imitation of Tiffany and Amos?" Theo asked, pulling a receipt from the folder. "Because we have the receipt here, paid with a credit card in the name of Lena Odom." I felt like I had been slapped. "You used my name to buy jewelry?" "Lena," Kira said, and for the first time her mask completely cracked. "You don't understand. Marcus and I are under so much pressure. His debts, our expenses. We just needed a little temporary help." "Temporary?" I repeated. "How long have you been stealing from me?" Elijah pulled out another document. "According to our investigator, the fraudulent transaction started 1.5 years ago. You used her information to open 3 credit cards. You have made unauthorized withdrawals from her savings account totaling over $1,000, and you have been intercepting her bank correspondence so she wouldn't notice." "Intercepting my correspondence? Do you remember when Kira offered to help you with the mail a few months ago?" Elijah asked. "When she said it would be easier if she handled organizing all your important accounts and documents." The memory hit me like lightning. Kira had been so sweet, so helpful. "Lena, honey, I know these financial things can be confusing. Why don't you let me handle organizing everything for you? Elijah has so much work and you already have enough worries." "But that's not the worst of it," Elijah continued, his expression growing even gloomier. "What could be worse than this?" I asked. Elijah looked at Marcus straight in the eyes. "Tell your mother about the plan for the assisted living." Marcus went completely pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Theo said, pulling a small voice recorder from his desk. Because we have this. He pressed the playback button, and Marcus's voice filled the office. It was a phone conversation, likely recorded without his knowledge. Kira, we need to speed up the timeline. Dad is starting to ask questions, and Mama isn't acting as confused as we hoped. Kira's voice responded from the recorder. I already spoke to the director at the Magnolia Place. Did you say you have the medical documents we need? The fake documents are ready. Once Mama is institutionalized, we can sell the house immediately. The market is good right now. I felt like I was falling off a cliff. Fake medical documents. The recording continued. And what if Elijah objects? Kira asked. Elijah isn't going to be a problem for much longer, Marcus replied, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Elijah paused the recording and looked at me with eyes full of pain. That conversation was recorded 3 weeks ago, Lena. 3 weeks before my death. The silence in the office was deafening. I looked at Marcus, trying to find some explanation, some way that this wasn't what it seemed. Elijah wasn't going to be a problem for much longer, I repeated slowly. What does that mean, Marcus? My son finally spoke, but his voice was that of a stranger. Mama, you're misinterpreting everything. We were just worried about Dad. His blood pressure had been high. He had been very stressed. Are you saying you were just waiting for me to die naturally? Elijah asked, standing up. Kira stepped forward, all pretense abandoned. Elijah, don't be dramatic. We were just being realistic about the future. Lena is going to need care eventually, and it's better to plan ahead. Plan ahead, I repeated, or speed up the process. Theo pulled another document from the folder. Lena, this may be the hardest thing to hear. It was a medical report. I read the first lines with growing horror. Patient shows clear signs of early dementia. Episodes of confusion, short-term memory loss, disorientation. Evaluation for full-time care recommended. This is a lie, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. I've never seen this doctor. Dr. Silas Thorne. I don't recognize this name. He's Kira's doctor, Elijah said. Someone who was willing to sign a false diagnosis in exchange for $10,000. I looked at Kira, the woman I had called daughter for 5 years. You paid a doctor to say I have dementia? Lena, Kira said, and for the first time I could see real panic in her eyes. You have to understand, we were trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I cried out, surprised by the strength of my own voice. From yourself, Marcus shouted back. Mama, you're old. Your mind isn't what it used to be. Kira and I can see things you can't see. Elijah stepped between Marcus and me. Lena has no mental problems. The only problem is that you have been gaslighting a 68-year-old woman for over a year, making her question her own reality so you could steal her money and her house. Gaslighting? What? I asked. Gaslighting, Theo explained. It's a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you doubt your own perception of reality. Elijah sat next to me and took my hands. My love, do you remember a few months ago when you couldn't find your car keys? And Kira suggested maybe you had lost them because your memory wasn't what it used to be? I nodded. It had been very distressing. We found the keys in Kira's purse, Elijah said softly. She had taken them. And do you remember when you couldn't find your blood pressure medication, and Marcus said you had probably forgotten where you put it? My heart began to beat faster. Yes, it was also in Marcus's car. One by one, Elijah began to explain situations that I had interpreted as signs of my mental decline. The day I couldn't find my purse, the time I was late for an appointment because I was sure it was at a different hour, the occasions when I couldn't recall conversations I was sure I had had. All of them had been orchestrated. For months, Elijah said, they have been systematically making you doubt your own mind, preparing the ground to declare you incompetent. I looked at Marcus and Kira, these two people I had loved and trusted. Why? I whispered. We're family. Kira laughed, a bitter sound I had never heard from her before. Family, Lena? You and Elijah have been an obstacle for us since the day we got married, sitting in this huge house accumulating money you never use while Marcus and I struggle every month. You never asked us for help, I said weakly. We didn't want your help, Marcus said. We wanted what's rightfully ours. What's rightfully yours? We are your family, Marcus exploded. That house should be ours. That money should be ours. You're going to die soon anyway. The silence that followed those words was absolute. In that moment, I knew I had lost my son forever. The person standing in front of me was a stranger who had been using my love against me, counting the days until my death so he could collect. But I also knew something else. For the first time in over a year, my mind was completely clear. I wasn't confused. I didn't have dementia. I was the victim of a cruel and systematic conspiracy carried out by the two people I trusted most. And now that I knew the truth, I would never be the same again. The following days were an emotional roller coaster I will never forget. Elijah stayed in a discreet hotel while Theo helped us navigate the legal complications of his resurrection. I returned home, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own life. Marcus and Kira had left Theo's office that day in a state of shock and fury. I hadn't heard from them for 48 hours until they appeared at my door on a Wednesday morning. I watched them arrive from the living room window. Marcus walked with that determination I recognized from his childhood when he had done something wrong and was determined to convince me it wasn't his fault. Kira followed him, but something in her posture told me the strategy this time would be different. I opened the door before they could ring the doorbell. "Hello, Mama," Marcus said, and his voice had that carefully controlled quality he used when trying to manage a difficult situation. "Marcus, Kira?" My voice sounded colder than I intended, but I didn't try to soften it. "Can we come in?" Kira asked. "We need to talk." I let them in, but I didn't invite them to sit down. We stood in the living room that had witnessed so many happy family gatherings and now felt like a battlefield. "Mama," Marcus began, "we've been thinking a lot about what happened in the office." "I'm sure you have." Kira took a step forward. "Lena, I think there are a lot of misunderstandings here. Yes, Marcus and I have been concerned about your well-being, but everything we did was with the best intentions." "The best intentions," I repeated. "Like using my name to open credit cards?" "Those cards were for emergencies," Marcus said quickly. "Expenses that might arise related to your care, like a $4,000 necklace." Kira sighed. "Okay, I made a mistake, but Lena, you have to understand the pressure we've been under. Marcus's debts, our expenses." "Your debts are not my responsibility," I said, surprised by how easy it was to say those words. Marcus changed tactics. "Mama, Dad is manipulating you. Doesn't it seem strange that he would fake his own death? What kind of man does that?" "The kind of man who is trying to protect his wife from a son who is planning to steal everything from her." "We weren't stealing," Marcus exploded. "That house, that money, it was eventually going to be ours anyway. We were just trying to speed up the process because we needed help." The brutal honesty of that statement left me speechless for a moment. "Marcus," I finally said, "you are telling me that you have been waiting for Elijah and me to die so you could have our money." "That's not how it sounds," Kira intervened desperately. "All families plan for the future. Families do not plan to declare their parents incompetent with false medical diagnoses." Kira turned pale. That was just a precaution in case you truly needed care in the future. A precaution you paid for with $10,000. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a sign he was losing patience. "Mama, listen to yourself. You've become paranoid. Dad is filling your head with crazy ideas." "Crazy ideas," I repeated, like the idea that I deserve to live in my own home without anyone trying to declare me crazy. No one is trying to declare you crazy, Marcus yelled. I walked to the phone and dialed a number I had memorized. What are you doing? Kira asked. Calling Elijah, I replied. I think he should be here for this conversation. Mama, no, Marcus said, but it was already too late. Elijah arrived 20 minutes later. He had been expecting my call, probably knowing this moment would come. When he walked in, the tension in the room immediately intensified. Marcus, Kira, he greeted them in a neutral voice. Dad, Marcus said, we need to resolve this as a family. Elijah sat next to me on the sofa, automatically taking my hand. I'm listening. Kira sat in the chair opposite us, assuming her most vulnerable posture. Elijah, I know what we did looks bad, but you have to understand that we were desperate. Explain the desperation, Elijah said. Marcus began to speak quickly, the words rushing out as if he had been rehearsing this speech. The debts piled up faster than we expected. The casino. I know it was stupid, but I thought I could win money fast. And when that didn't work, we panicked. So you decided to rob your parents? Elijah asked. It's not robbing, Marcus shouted. You have more money than you'll ever spend. That house is too big for 2 people. We were just accelerating the inheritance. Accelerating the inheritance by declaring me incompetent? I asked. Kira started to cry. Not real tears, but the kind of calculated crying I had seen her use on other occasions when she wanted to get something. Lena, we never wanted to hurt you. We just wanted to ensure you were taken care of and that we could pay off our debts. You thought you could manage both by stealing my money and locking me up in an assisted living facility, I said. It wasn't a nursing home, Marcus said. The Magnolia Place is a very nice retirement community. You would have been comfortable there. Against my will. You would have adapted eventually, Kira murmured. The silence that followed was absolute. I think it was at that moment that even they realized how monstrous what they had been planning sounded. Elijah slowly stood up. Marcus, I want you to listen very carefully to what I am about to say. My son looked up, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the child he had been. Your mother and I have decided that you are no longer a part of our lives, Elijah said in a firm but unemotional voice. We don't want to see you. We don't want to hear from you. And we definitely don't want you to have access to any of our finances or properties. Marcus jumped to his feet. You can't do that. I'm your son. You are my biological son, Elijah corrected, but you stopped being my family the day you decided our death would be more convenient for you than our life. Kira also stood up, her crying now completely abandoned. This is ridiculous, Elijah. Lena, you can't cut us off completely. We're family. No, I said, also standing up. Family doesn't try to steal. Family doesn't try to make their loved ones doubt their own sanity. Family doesn't count the days until you die to cash in your money. Marcus looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. You know what, Mama? Maybe you're right. Maybe this is better for everyone. Because I was already tired of pretending that I cared about you when all I really wanted was for you to get out of the way. Those words hit me like a physical slap, but strangely, they also liberated me. All the love, all the guilt, all the hope that there might be some misunderstanding evaporated at that moment. Leave, I said simply. Take your things out of my house and leave. Gladly, Marcus said, but this doesn't end here. We're going to fight this. We're going to prove that Dad faked his death, that you're not competent to make decisions. Elijah smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Go ahead. And when you do, be sure to explain to the judge why you were planning to declare your mother incompetent with fake medical documents. I'm sure he'll be very interested in hearing about that. Marcus and Kira looked at each other, and I could see the panic growing in their eyes as they realized they had no exit strategy. This doesn't end here, Marcus muttered, but his voice had lost all conviction. Yes, it does, I said. It ends exactly here. I watched them leave, knowing it would probably be the last time I would see my son. I should have felt sadness, but all I felt was a deep, clean relief. For the first time in over a year, I was free. 6 months later, I am sitting on the porch of our new home, watching Elijah plant roses in the garden he had always dreamed of having. We moved to a small town called Redwood Springs, 3 hours away, where no one knows our story and where we can simply be Elijah and Lena, a retired couple enjoying their golden years. The transition was not easy. There were moments, especially during the first few weeks, when I woke up in the pre-dawn hours wondering if we had done the right thing. Cutting off Marcus completely felt like amputating a part of my body, no matter how infected it was. But Elijah constantly reminded me why we had made that decision. "My love," he would say when he found me crying at night, "you cannot save someone who is willing to destroy you." Theo had helped us manage the legal complications. Falsifying the death certificate resulted in some fines and community service for Elijah, but when the evidence of Marcus and Kira's conspiracy was presented, the judge was surprisingly sympathetic. "I've seen many cases of elder financial abuse," he had told us during the hearing, "but rarely one as systematic and cruel as this." Marcus and Kira tried to follow through on their threat to fight legally, but their case quickly fell apart when the district attorney decided to investigate the fraudulent credit cards and the false medical documents. In the end, they were the ones who faced criminal charges, not us. The last I heard of them, Marcus was serving 18 months of probation for financial fraud. Kira had lost her nursing license. They had divorced 6 weeks after everything came to light, each blaming the other for dragging them into such a desperate situation. I feel no satisfaction in their downfall. I only feel a strange sense of closure, like when you finish reading a book that had been disturbing you and you can finally put it aside. We sold the big house where we had raised Marcus. It was too full of complicated memories, and frankly, they were right about one thing. It was too big for 2 people. With the money from the sale, we bought this smaller house in Redwood Springs, with enough land for Elijah's garden and a view of the mountains that makes every sunrise feel like a gift. We also paid off all the debts Marcus and Kira had accumulated in our name, not because we owed it to them, but because we wanted to start this new phase of our lives completely clean, without any financial connection to our past. "Do you think Marcus will ever understand what he did?" I ask Elijah one evening as we prepare dinner together. Elijah stops chopping vegetables and looks at me with those wise eyes that made me fall in love with him 46 years ago. "I don't know, my love, but it is no longer our responsibility to teach him. That is the hardest lesson I have learned in these months. For 35 years, I felt responsible for Marcus's happiness and well-being. Even when he became an adult, even when he got married, he was still my baby who needed protection and guidance. But some adults choose paths their parents cannot follow, and sometimes the truest love is knowing when to let them go. We've made new friends here. Brenda and George, the couple next door, invited us to dinner last week. During the conversation, Brenda mentioned that they had cut ties with their son 10 years ago. He was an addict, she explained simply, and every time we tried to help him, he dragged us into his chaos. In the end, we had to choose to save our marriage and our sanity or continue to be victims of his destruction. "Was it difficult?" I asked. George took Brenda's hand. "It was the hardest decision of our lives, but it was also the one that saved us." I hadn't realized until that moment how much I needed to hear that we weren't the only parents who had had to make such an extreme decision. This morning, Elijah brought me coffee in bed, a routine we've developed in our new life. As I took my first sip, I noticed he had left a letter on the nightstand. "What is this?" I asked. "It arrived yesterday. It's from Marcus." My heart stopped for a moment. "Did you read it?" "It's for you." I held the letter for several minutes before opening it. The handwriting was the same I had seen on thousands of Mother's Day cards, but the words were those of a stranger. "Mama," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something. Kira and I divorced. She blamed everything that happened on my gambling debts, but I know the truth is more complicated than that." He went on to explain that he was in therapy, trying to understand how he had reached the point of conspiring against his own parents. The therapist says I have entitlement issues, that I've always felt I deserved things without working for them. It came to the point near the end. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I understand why you had to walk away from me. If you ever want to give me another chance, I'll be working to be the person I should have been all along. When I finished reading, I handed the letter to Elijah. What do you think? I think he sounds like someone who is trying to change, I said honestly. But I also think words are easy. Elijah nodded. And what do you want to do? Nothing, I said, surprising myself with the certainty of my answer. I want to continue living our life, and if one day he proves with real actions that he has changed, maybe we can reconsider. And if he never does? I looked out the window at the garden, where the roses Elijah had planted were beginning to bloom. Then we will live a beautiful life without him. That afternoon, while Elijah worked in the garden, I decided to write my own letter, not to Marcus, but to myself, a kind of declaration of independence from the guilt I had been carrying. Dear 68-year-old Lena, I wrote, forgive yourself for loving so much that it almost cost you everything. Forgive yourself for trusting so much that it almost cost you your sanity. Forgive yourself for believing that family love is always unconditional. But also, celebrate your strength. Celebrate that when you finally saw the truth, you had the courage to act on it. Celebrate that you chose your own life over everyone else's comfort. That night, as Elijah and I prepared for sleep in our new bedroom with a view of the mountains, he asked me, do you regret anything? Cutting him off completely? No, I replied without hesitation. Not seeing the signs sooner, sometimes. And me faking my death? I smiled. It was dramatic, but effective. Elijah laughed. Definitely effective. We were silent for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night in our new home. You know what the strangest thing is? I said finally. What? I feel younger now than I did when I was 50, as if I had been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. Elijah took my hand in the darkness. That's what happens when you stop living for other people and start living for yourself. This morning, I received a call from Brenda, our new neighbor. Lena, she said, a group of us are going to the farmer's market on Saturday, and then we thought we'd grab lunch at that new French cafe. Would you like to come? I'd love to, I replied without hesitation. A year ago, I would have had to consult with Marcus and Kira, make sure they didn't need anything, consider if it was appropriate for a woman my age to go out with friends. Now, I simply say yes to the things that make me happy. As I write these lines, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea and the sound of Elijah whistling as he waters his roses, I realize that this is the first time in decades that I feel completely free. Free from guilt, free from expectations, free from the need to justify my decisions to people who never had my best interests at heart. Marcus was right about one thing. Elijah and I probably won't live many more years, but the years we have left will be ours, lived on our terms, surrounded by people who love us unconditionally and without hidden agendas. And I discovered that is worth more than any toxic family tie I may have lost in the process. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from having the courage to walk into the unknown, leaving behind even those you loved most when the love had become indistinguishable from the harm. Tonight, I will sleep soundly for the first time in 2 years, knowing that tomorrow I will wake up to a life that is completely mine. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one, with love.